Hi everybody, my name is Joe Gross and we will be discussing my study of gasoline ethanol blend emissions and cost in the heavy duty sector.
I'm sure I don't need to remind people that fossil fuel prices are extraordinarily high right now.
As of October 25th, when this data was collected, the U.S. national average diesel and gas costs were $5.37 and $3.85 a gallon. Ethanol was only $2.16.
In addition to rising fuel costs, the heavy-duty vehicle sector is struggling with high soot emissions. This is a black carbon that enters in the atmosphere and contributes towards respiratory diseases and cancers.
To combat this, emission regulations are growing ever tighter and have reduced to nearly zero tailpipe soot emissions. So who cares about this? Consumers, farmers, engineers, engine manufacturers, and the Department of Energy. For all these groups, these things equate to time and money. This is especially of concern for the consumer, who is also likely very concerned with the health effects of soot emissions. This project aims to build a strong case for the development of engines that use ethanol and ethanol gasoline blends. For economic reasons, sure, but also to aid the pursuit of zero soot emissions in the heavy-duty sector, which could save approximately 19,000 lives and prevent around 6,500 hospitalizations based on data from the EPA and the Internal Council of Clean Transportation. Not only do consumers care, but if this work successfully builds a case for ethanol and ethanol gasoline blends as a fuel, the research world, industry, and the PI from Marquette's project involving these fuels will all benefit. This project consists of two parts: quantifying the consumer cost benefit of these fuels and building and analyzing a model for determining how much soot is produced when these fuels are burned in an engine. The data that will be used for this project includes public data on both national and state fuel cost averages on the properties of those fuels in order to determine mileage. We also use experimental data from our lab on soot emissions for fuels E10, E30, E85, and E100. Because we were interested in those particular fuels, and not all of them are commercially available everywhere, some techniques will have to be employed to fill in the missing state-by-state data or to extrapolate to global averages. There are several methodologies geared to accomplish our goal of assessing the costs and emissions of ethanol and gasoline blends. The primary challenge, while it isn't entirely statistical but will employ statistics as data management, as manipulation of our data, both experimental and public, will be necessary to extract useful information. Probability and statistical inferencing lumped together here as they play a bit of a smaller role will allow us to gather intelligence from the fuel mileage information and answer questions that could directly affect consumers in the Midwest, which is a primary demographic for this engine technology, or even about worldwide consumer benefits of these fuels. It will also allow us to analyze the soot emissions model that we build and apply it to Marquette University's 9-liter engine. Nonlinear regression plays a large role as well, as this directly allows us to use the specific soot data at certain fuel quantities we have collected for the fuels of interest and build a model to determine the soot emissions for any amount of fuel. Also, if the data between fuels, in other words, for any ethanol percentage, is well predicted by a linear model, we can interpolate to ultimately have a more robust model for all ethanol contents at any quantity of fuel. This information can be used directly in engine design. Some other considered approaches include building a predictive model for not just fuel content, but for any possible operating condition that an engine could run at, which may impact soot emissions. This was suggested by some classmates. This would be interesting, but the high cost and upfront work for what could potentially amount to very inaccurate results make it unfeasible for the time being. Further incorporating soot regulations in the analysis of our model is necessary because it is just safe to assume that within the next several years, regulations will mandate effectively no soot out of the exhaust, which is why, even though this was suggested, we're not employing this strategy. Lastly, while we do use some form of probability and hypothesis testing when analyzing the consumer cost data, and statistics do play a role in using the soot model, using hypothesis testing and probability to analyze the soot model may prove challenging because it's very likely we will find conditions that we want to design to, i.e. zero soot regions have virtually no variability. so there's not much need for probability or hypothesis testing and analyzing the soot model. So in summary, why are we doing this? Build the case for ethanol and ethanol gasoline blend engine technology in the heavy-duty sector. Are these fuels cost effective? Well, not accounting for miles per gallon for different energy density. Nationwide, per gallon, ethanol is $3.21 at the time this data was taken, cheaper than diesel, and $1.68 cheaper than gasoline. Not only are there potential consumer cost benefits, but there's also health benefits and benefits towards saving people's lives. Given enough information, we could produce engines that run on these fuels that are essentially zero soot emissions, which is projected to save as many as 19,000 people a year. What data are we using? Publicly available data for state and national fuel costs for both current fossil fuels and the fuels of interest, E10, E30, E85, and E100. Properties of the fuels, so we can actually figure out what the differences in mileages are. And then laboratory soot formation data that we've collected for those fuels of interest. And then lastly, the how, essentially which methodologies that we're using. This project will consist of two parts: the analysis of the fuel costs and building the soot model for engine design. The biggest factor is the data management, both for the building the model and for the fuel costs. Other strategies we'll employ are probability and statistical inferencing, and then the second largest methodology would be regression and then interpolation to build and use the soot model. Thank you.